She still remembered the first moment he said it. The moment he called her Mrs. Thompson in a voice so gentle it felt like fingertips brushing against her heart. It was late, almost 9 p.m., and the office floors above Manhattan were nearly silent. Only the glow of computer screens lit the wide glass room, and the faint hum of the city far below echoed like a reminder that real life existed somewhere outside those walls. Emily Thompson, a 44-year-old corporate executive with a reputation of being sharp, disciplined, and untouchable, had stayed behind to finalize a troubled merger. She never expected her new college intern to still be there. But when she turned and saw him sitting quietly at the far desk with his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly messy, and his eyes focused with a seriousness most men twice his age didn't have, something inside her shifted in a way she couldn't explain. His name was Landon Brooks, 21, brilliant, polite, observant, and dangerously unaware of how his presence softened the edges of her world. When he looked up and said, "Need help with that, Mrs. Thompson?" she felt something unfamiliar move through her. Not attraction, no. She wasn't irresponsible, but recognition. Recognition of a softness she hadn't felt in years. Recognition of a connection she wasn't supposed to acknowledge. She tried to sound firm, even cold, when she told him he shouldn't be working this late. But he simply smiled in that calm, respectful way of his and said, "You shouldn't be here either. But if you're staying, I'm staying." The storm outside intensified. Rain streaking the tall windows until the city lights blurred into long streaks of red and gold. They worked in silence, the kind that felt almost intimate. Every few minutes she'd glance over and catch him studying a document with remarkable depth. Every time she walked past his desk, she felt his quiet attention shift to her, not in a way that crossed boundaries, but in a way that reminded her she wasn't invisible. When the power flickered for a second and the room went dark, she inhaled sharply. In that brief moment of darkness, she felt his presence more intensely than she should have. When the lights returned, he was watching her with an expression she had no business understanding. Later, when she reached for a file, their hands accidentally brushed. It was just a second skin against skin, but it sent a warm jolt racing up her arm so suddenly that she froze. He froze too. The air between them shifted, tightened, filled with something fragile and unspoken. "We can't," she whispered. She wasn't sure what she meant. Maybe everything, maybe nothing. But he stepped back immediately, giving her space, giving her control, giving her the assurance that he would never be the one to cross the line. Yet his eyes were too honest when he said, "I know, but you're not just a boss to me." And that honesty, that gentle sincerity, terrified her more than anything. The next morning, people in the office noticed the change. They noticed the way he carried her files before she asked, the way he stood a little closer than most interns dared, the way she avoided looking directly at him because she was afraid her expression would betray her. Corporate hallways had sharp ears. One coworker joked, "Your intern is very loyal." She smiled politely, but inside, dread tightened in her stomach. She didn't want rumors. She didn't want complications. She didn't want her career, built over 20 years, to crumble because of one stormy night. That afternoon, Landon knocked softly on her door. He didn't step inside until she nodded. "I heard what they said," he murmured. "I don't want you uncomfortable. I can request a transfer," but the idea of him leaving hit her unexpectedly hard. She didn't realize until that moment how deeply his presence had woven into her daily rhythm. "No," she said too quickly. "You deserve to stay. You've worked so hard." He smiled, a small, relieved smile, and something warm fluttered inside her chest. The company hosted a corporate gala at the end of that week. Emily arrived with the calm confidence she had perfected over decades. But when she spotted him across the room, wearing a perfectly fitted navy suit and trying to blend into a sea of executives, her heartbeat quickened. He didn't approach her at first. He kept his distance. He was smart enough to know the rules, smart enough to know eyes were watching. But when she stepped onto the balcony to breathe fresh air, he followed a few minutes later. "You look powerful tonight," he said, standing far enough to be appropriate but close enough for her to hear him over the music. The word powerful made her feel more beautiful than any compliment ever had. They talked about work, about the city, about ambition, about futures they both pretended weren't colliding. When the event ended and she returned to her office to grab her coat, she wasn't expecting him to show up at her doorway again. But there he was, hesitant, respectful, yet drawn to her by something neither of them could label. He said her name again, Mrs. Thompson, but the way he said it this time broke every wall she had spent years building. It wasn't formal. It wasn't professional. It was filled with emotion he could no longer hide. She turned slowly, and he stepped inside, hands shaking slightly, voice trembling with caution. "I don't want your position," he whispered. "I don't want a shortcut. I don't want anything from you except what I feel when I am around you." His vulnerability disarmed her. His honesty shook her. And when she finally walked toward him, the world around them seemed to fall away. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't something reckless. It was her hand in his, her forehead resting against his chest, his breath trembling as he whispered her name like it meant something sacred. It was the moment they both knew they couldn't pretend anymore. Morning brought consequences. Not romantic ones, real ones. They sat in her office before anyone else arrived, and he was the one who said they had to tell HR. He refused to let her reputation take damage. He refused to hide. He refused to let fear make him dishonest. She respected him more in that moment than she had respected any man in her life. HR handled everything cleanly. He was transferred to a different division. She kept her position. The company closed the matter. Months later, when his internship officially ended, she thought he would simply disappear into the world, young, brilliant, full of potential. But he waited outside the building for her, hands in pockets, nervous but hopeful. No titles now. he said softly. No rules, no office. Just Emily and me. And for the first time in a long, long time, she let herself choose something purely for her own heart.